Today I would say that it was a beautiful experience, simply because I have seen so many colors, heard so many sounds. It was an unbelievable lightness. There was this light as well, this light which had been waiting for me. So many people appeared to welcome me. It was almost like a party which has been celebrated for me. I said, "It's so nice here. I would love to stay, but I still have a little daughter on earth." Then I have been asked, "Do you want to stay or do you want to return? There is a possibility for you to stay here." But I have chosen my daughter and my life back then.
Ms. Rode, you are a medium. You've told me beforehand that you already had natural mediumship abilities as a child, and you had 3 near-death experiences. Let's start there, please. What happened back then?
My near-death experiences always occurred due to surgeries. I had a very complex appendix operation where the appendix had grown upwards into the rib cage. Anyways, it was a very long-lasting and complicated surgery, and during the surgery I had my very first near-death experience. It was actually quite interesting, since this one differed from the ones I had later on as an adult. I was out of my body, but at the same time, I saw a second me at a lake in Finland, where I had usually spent my summers. I was very confused, since on the one side I was at the lake, while another part of me knew that my body was going through a surgery with complications.
How old were you during that surgery?
I was 9 years old.
And were there complications?
Yes, complications occurred with things like breathing pauses as a result. So apparently I had to be revived during the surgery. But I have made these kind of experiences over and over again throughout my life, that consciousness is not only bound to the body. That is something I've realized as a very small child already. A small example of that is when my mother and I visited our relatives in Finland. I mean, what do 3- or 4-year-old children like to do? They like to open drawers in the home of strangers, even though it is not allowed, obviously. I was a child of the 60s, where one had to wear a fine dress and Sunday shoes. At one point, I was getting so bored, so I sat underneath the table while one part of me was able to go through the room. My mother, who was very well aware of that, always pushed my shoulder a little under the table and whispered to me, "I know exactly what you're doing here. That is what it means to come from a mediumistic family."
How can one imagine that? To go through the room? Were you exploring?
Yes, of course. I was actually exploring and able to see through drawers. Nowadays, I can't do that anymore, unless I'm in a meditative state. But as a child, that was a very normal condition for me.
What exactly did happen to you in that first near-death experience during that surgery?
Well, a light appeared, and I was very confused. This light was so bright as if the sun itself would have come down from the sky. The light was pulsating, glowing towards me, and I felt infinite joy within me. An unknown woman appeared out of this light, which made no sense to me. It was not until much, much later when I understood that it was actually my Finnish great-grandmother, who had died around 10 years before my birth. I have a very special connection with her because she was not only my great-grandmother, she was my mother in a previous life as well. which I can remember quite vividly, because this is something that has always been a part of me from the very beginning, and it was allowed to be. Since I grew up in such an environment with a mediumistic mother and grandmother.
That means you've had these memories of a previous life and they've stayed?
Multiple ones. They stayed and were followed by more. They were actually very important for my current life. Every single experience had a significance for that which I am doing today. I was the only child until I was 11 years old. Then a brother was born, whereas I had always missed a sister. I think I was a very difficult child. I started elementary school in the mid-60s. Now, imagine a child saying the following during religion class. It's not even true that one just stays in heaven. One comes back. Then they have tried to silence me, and my mother had to come to my school quite often. Also, I had a class teacher that I really loved and looked up to. It was a lady who had these big brown doe eyes. I told her once that I was actually supposed to have a sister, but my parents did not adopt her as well. I think this happened in terms of the religion class too, which we had with her. That has eventually brought me to a psychologist.
Who wanted you to visit a psychologist?
The school. The school, since I wasn't as adapted as the others.
Studies, especially the ones from the United States, have shown that apparently there are lots of children who have memories of past lives, but mostly up until the age of 5 or 6. After this stage, they begin to fade, and it is assumed that this happens because reincarnation is a topic that's taboo in our society. Otherwise, these memories would last much longer. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. We live in a society which doesn't acknowledge that. I believe I was very lucky, for I was born in a very spiritual family, even though one wouldn't have defined it as such back then. For my mother and my Finnish grandmother, who have been extremely important for my life, that was something absolutely normal. And whenever something like that was talked about, it was talked about in Finnish, not in German. Because of my Catholic father, who was not denying such things at that point, but couldn't really conform to them either, maybe even until today.
Back to the first near-death experience. You said that you had seen your great-grandmother. Was there some sort of communication with her?
Yes, the communication happened telepathically. I was able to feel her love, and by the way, it was the place where my grandmother lived. She told me that it was something absolutely normal, but that it was not my time yet, so I would return again. But that she would be happy about the contact, and that she would have been very happy if I would have visited her.
Later on, you had 2 more near-death experiences.
Later on, I had 2 other near-death experiences. The first one happened due to a biliary surgery. My daughter was 7 months old at that time. I had an aneurysm, which is a family topic, in the upper gut area. This aneurysm opened up after the biliary surgery. Therefore, an emergency operation had to be performed.
The experiences occurred once again during surgery?
Yes, it was once again during a surgery. It was horrific, since the anesthesia didn't work properly. I felt how it was opened again. The scar and the cuts were opened up again. And I couldn't say anything. Therefore, I decided for myself, I cannot do this anymore. I don't want to. The last thing I heard, already from a distance, while being above the body and looking down at the scenery, was, "Oh, she collapses," which means an immense blood loss. The blood, she bleeds, she collapses. They got blood bottles, and it became very hectic. Everything was too much for me. I distanced myself. And I think the soul knows where to withdraw itself, and that we know where the soul's home is. For me, it was to simply walk through this transition. Today I would say that it was a beautiful experience, simply because I have seen so many colors, heard so many sounds. It was an unbelievable lightness. There was this light as well, this light which had been waiting for me. So many people appeared to welcome me. It was almost like a party which has been celebrated for me. I said, "It's so nice here. I would love to stay, but I still have a little daughter on earth." Then I have been asked, "Do you want to stay or do you want to return? There is a possibility for you to stay here." But I have chosen my daughter and my life back then. I would call it a state of bliss, and I think that this is something that we cannot even slightly put into words here on earth. The beauty as well that this world had to offer. I was shown planes where one was able to go. I was in a space which allowed me to look into kind of like movie sequences of my life, but from every perspective. I have seen how one of my friends and I tortured a boy who lived next door. I like to tell this until today, this not so laudable story. Many, many years later, I apologized to him for being so mean. I have seen what it caused inside of him, and I felt really poorly for what I had done. It may seem like not a big deal now, but in that very moment, it is huge. It is something huge whenever we cause pain to someone else, emotional pain. I was so incredibly sorry, and this consciousness has changed a lot in my life. The childhood experience was one thing, but this one was a fundamental experience of mine, which I could never talk about actually. I always kept it to myself, both the experience I had as a child as well as the one I made as a young woman. 4 years later, I have made yet again a similar experience after the birth of my second daughter.
Under what kind of circumstances?
The circumstances were the following. My mother passed away shortly before that, and I just gave birth to my second daughter. It was a very difficult kind of birth, a C-section. All I wanted is this child to be born, to live, because it was said that my daughter would suffer from brain damage and that she wouldn't be able to walk, to count, and so forth. The pediatrician came in and told me all of these horror stories. I remember that I was laying alone in the room after hearing the statements from this pediatric neurologist, since my daughter had been directly taken away to the newborn nursery and was being ventilated there. I lied there and thought, enough, I don't want to anymore. I'm not quite sure what happened there, but the limit was reached. My midwife, who came to look after and talk to me, had found me there without a heartbeat, with no breathing. Through some sort of fog, I felt a movement from the bed, and I heard how the midwife screamed into my ear, or maybe these were just her thoughts, I'm not sure. She screamed, "You are not dying here. No way. The next memory is me being out of body and everything was finally at peace.
And then you experienced your home again, so to speak.
Yes, of course. My mother was there, my grandmother, and all the people I loved so much and have missed so dearly. They were all there, all of my animals too. I am very connected to nature. The animals from my life were there. It was a transition. Up until this day, I am getting emotional about it. I thought for so long whether to stay there or not.
Was there again a moment of choice?
Again, there was this moment of choice. That's when my mother said, "You know, it's your choice. You can stay here, but look what's going to happen. Look what will happen on earth." The light appeared again, and out of this light formed a male person who came closer to me and said, "You have a mission still." I know today that he is my spirit guide. Back then, I didn't even know what that is. So he said, "You still have a task to do. There are many people requiring your assistance." I replied, "I just want to stay here in this peace. I want to continue my learning here. I want to keep listening in the hall of knowledge here." And I was told, "You will. You'll be able to do so. We will make sure of that. But first, your soul is allowed to heal." Then I was clearly shown what would happen if I would not return, what my daughter's destiny would have been. From both of them, the newborn one and the 3-year-old at the time. Therefore, much to my regret, I had said that I will go back. I have to say that I went through depths for the first 13 years, basically all by myself, since I couldn't accept anyone's help and didn't want to. And very often I thought about simply leaving, but at the end of the day I couldn't, since I've seen my duty with my children, with my family. I had a 17-year-old brother who needed my support as well at the time.
Regarding the term Hall of Knowledge, how did you experience that?
The Hall of Knowledge is a wonderful place where one can listen to spiritual teachers. It is a round room where multiple aisles from all sides lead to, and if one looks up, one can see the sky and the stars above one. It's kind of like in Harry Potter, which is why I love Harry Potter so much. It's because I recognize so many elements from my near-death experiences, or from the so-called afterlife, even though I don't like the term afterlife, from the soul's home. In the Hall of Knowledge, one learns and has all the knowledge available, unlike on Earth. That is a room where I really liked spending time in.
Generally speaking, could you imagine that the things we read in fantasy or science fiction novels are inspired by actual conditions?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In the past 25 to 30 years, I have learned about so many things that exist between heaven and earth. Speaking of fantasy novels, I mean, let's look at Jules Verne. Jules Verne is a time traveler for me. I think that so much more is possible if we leave the limitations of our bodies behind, as well as let go of the limitations that are given to us by science or society.
The near-death experience has influenced you very much in the further course of your life and family.
Absolutely, especially regarding my personal development. These were important experiences that I was allowed to make. I believe I wouldn't be the same person I am today if it wouldn't be for these experiences. Nowadays, I can embrace life. I couldn't do that in the past.
How did your youngest daughter feel health-wise?
She became a teacher. Yes, she studied. I am a person who is very resilient and stands one's ground. After I returned, it was absolutely clear to me that I want to see my child and that I will take over this now. I was told that if I would get active and take it in my hand, then everything would turn out well, and I had trust in that.
Was it a long struggle until everything was truly well again?
Well, the struggle inside me was a very long one, since I had lost the two most important people to me. During my pregnancy with my oldest daughter, I had lost my Finnish grandmother, and 3.5 years later, my mother. These were the people with whom I could talk about anything, and the feeling of loneliness stayed ever since that. I felt alone all the time.
How did you become a medium?
If someone would have told me that in the past, I would have replied, "You're crazy. How am I a medium? I am just me." I think that's because if we are born with these abilities, we don't even realize them. I have always seen colors around people. My mother had been given the following advice from Professor Bender. I think he is well known in Freiburg, and we went there since weird things happened to me as a child. He said, "Just tell her that this is normal, that every human being feels like that." Therefore, it was obvious to me that everyone was able to see auras. Everyone can see the shadows behind people. It is something absolutely normal. That's how I lived my life, but I always wondered why others considered me being weird or spooky. Especially since it was normal for me to talk with people who might not have been there for others.
Does that mean that this kind of seeing is a state of daily life, or do you switch it on somehow?
No, it's quite ordinary for me on a daily basis. Mediumship can be learned to a certain degree, or we bring it with us. I wouldn't say that I am somehow enlightened. I am actually someone quite normal. Besides, I always called it my genetic quirk. I think that actually every human being is born with mediumistic abilities. In my case, it was probably further developed since I was someone who was always in sync with nature, and in fact a little overwhelmed with other people, because too many emotions spilled over. Or being in big crowds was never something I felt comfortable with. I like to be in nature, with myself and by myself. And because it has always been a part of me, I didn't notice that there was something different about me. I believe I was 38 years old and I had 5 sisters-in-law. So once a month there was a sister-in-law day. The first couple times I was being taken with them. But afterwards, not anymore. And one of my sisters-in-law just told me, "You know, you're just weird. Do you even know how the others call you? A witch." That was yet again damaging, so I decided, no, not anymore. But it was this sister-in-law who took me to an English medium who did a medium event, which was my very first experience with a medium. Sure, I have read Raymond A. Moody and was quite fascinated. Finally, someone with people who made similar experiences to mine. So I didn't feel as weird. But talking about it was basically never an option. It was not until 5 or 6 years ago when I began to be more open about it. It was so deep within me that I simply couldn't pass it on and didn't want to pass it on. Especially because one has the feeling of being not understood. No one could really relate to that besides my mother.
And the first contact with the English medium was quite imprinting for your path?
Yes, it was very exciting. I came into the room and, of course, I was just a rebound girl for my sister-in-law. Means I was attending the event, sitting completely elsewhere. And I was looking through the room to see who else was there. There was a lady who obviously came from Asia, and I said, "Okay, That's a Filipino woman. Then I saw the father, who recently passed away. Then another lady was sitting there, and I saw a young motorcyclist standing next to her with his helmet in his hand, and many others. So I thought, let's see his abilities. I bet they are all just charlatans. That was my attitude. But as a matter of fact, he pointed out these exact people who I found as well. And by people, I mean the deceased ones. He picked them out as well. And then it was my turn. It's not that I wanted to. I would have rather sunk into my chair. Then I received a message from my German grandfather, whom I loved very much as well. He died when I was 6 years old. He said something, and I mean, one knows my critical mind. I don't necessarily accept everything. I'm a Virgo, means I'm very analytical and critical in my thinking. So then he said, "Your daughter has so much fun with the fish. You used to enjoy swimming too." I said, "Well, yes, my daughter has a book about a fish, a rainbow fish, and she just received her swimming badge too, which was all matching. My husband took care of the kids, and when I returned in the evening, I went into my children's room, of course, to see if everything was fine, just like a mother does. And guess what was leaning against the wall behind my daughter's desk? A poster with a rainbow fish. She had convinced my husband so that he bought her this expensive poster during the time when he took care of them. That was something that made me think, hey, okay, he actually did perceive something. I was like Alice in Wonderland and thought, yippee, there's my tribe now. These are the ones who understand me and are just like me. That's where I need to go.
That means this was the first time in your life when someone else saw what you had seen, which is usually not visible to others.
Absolutely, and I was so happy about it. I finally didn't feel like the lonely unicorn anymore, which I was for a certain time. I thought, there they are, the other unicorns.
From then on, you have dealt more and more with mediums?
Exactly. My children were still small, and the spirit is very intelligent. So I visited seminars 3 to 4 times a year and have met other mediums now and then. That's when I began to read about this topic and understand what a medium actually does. What does mediumship mean? Over this whole time I learned about the English mediumship from scratch, and then came across Gordon Smith again. There was a friend, a child and adolescent psychologist, who gifted me a book on Christmas and said, "Look, this man, this medium, has your eyes. I've read this book and he remarkably reminds me of you. He is just like you." So I began to read the book and even finished it on Christmas Eve and began my search until I found several other books. In the beginning of January, during my lunch break, I thought to myself, I should check if this medium, Gordon, plans on coming to Germany. I really want to see him perform his work. And indeed, by the end of January, around 14 days later, he was in Frankfurt. I even remember thinking in my lunch break, this event will be completely sold out. Which actually was the case, and the lady whom I called said to me, "You know what? Today one spot became available. I think it's yours." So that's where I noticed that I had found my master. By the way, one of his first sentences was very succinct to me. He said to me, "You don't remember, do you?" I looked at him and asked, "Why? We don't know each other, besides that I have read your books." He said, "You don't remember it? That the master becomes the student and the student becomes the master?" All I did was looking at him, since it was all Greek to me. He continued by saying, "My rainbow-colored lady," since he didn't know my name at the time. "Then look within." Many years later, I had found a recording at home from a meditation. In this meditation, I saw two monks who were walking through some mountain massif. I assume it was the Himalaya, and I know that I was the master at that time. Back in times, whenever there was a famine in the village, the Buddhist or Hindu monks, I can't really differentiate here, had sacrificed themselves in order to ward off the famine by going to a certain state where all the body functions turned off so they could leave it. That was done to serve and to placate the gods. And I know that I was the master, and I had the student. This student said something to me, which I wrote down in my notebook. "Master, will we see each other again?" I turned around, looked at him, and said, "Yes, we will see each other, but next time, you will be my master, and I will be your student." I have shown Gordon this recording much later and said, "Look at this. Our connection was forecasted years ago."
And he knew that?
He knew that since he told me about it the first time we met. And I was completely unaware of the fact that I had a rainbow-colored aura. That was something I have been told later on by many others too. I have dealt a lot with other people's auras, but never with my own. I was able to learn a lot through him.
How did you decide to make mediumship your profession?
Oh, many years have passed until that. In this very first seminar, he asked me to work as a medium. And he said that I should hold seminars and circles, what he would do as well. I looked at him and thought, no, I don't even have time for that. I'm quite busy with my life, and I already have a job which I like, so no. But he said, "Yes, absolutely. It's your purpose." I said, "Well, okay," and went home. A friend of mine asked me how it went, and I said, "It was absolutely great, but this medium said that I should do mediumistic events." Means delivering messages from the spirit world, circles, and educate people regarding spirituality and mediumship and so on. I mean, when should I do all this? And who would be even interested in me? "Oh, why?" she replied. "I know plenty of people." That's how all of it started, step by step, so I could get used to it, gain experience, grow, and mature through it. Whenever the spirit world intervenes when we walk on our predetermined path, then it is always in an intelligent and guided way. This means my children grew up, went on their own path, I had more time, and then the day has come when I woke up at 2:30 in the morning, which has always been an incisive time for me. My spirit guide, with whom I was in contact already at that time, told me, "Today you're quitting your job." I replied, "I am going to quit my job today? No, not me. Never. I have to pay off my mortgage. I have 2 children. So, no way."
What kind of job did you have?
I have worked for a big mining company as a sales consultant for underground mining machines and had to deal with mostly Chinese customers.
Bergbaumaschinen für Untertagebergbau und hatte hauptsächlich jemand mit chinesischen Kunden zu tun und da gab's auch so viele.
And we had many funny incidents, especially due to my mediumistic abilities. Yes, but I really did it. I was on my way to work. I had about an hour, and I said to my spirit guide, "Are you for real about me quitting my job? I can't do that. I have this and that project to do."
Ja, und dann war's tatsächlich so, dass mir mein Geist.
Then my spirit guide asked me one question, and it was a question I couldn't avoid. The question was, "You are always telling people that they should trust us and that one should be authentic. How much do you trust us if we tell you that now the time has come to leave?" That was the point of no return. So I went in there grudgingly. As of today, 6 years later, this company is being closed. It doesn't exist any longer. This was the ideal moment of leaving the company.
Before we talk about your work as a medium, would you please tell us a short incident from the stint at the mining company?
Oh, there's a really funny one with an elderly lady.
Ja, wir hatten eine ältere Dame, die hat.
She was a mediator between the Chinese government or partly government-organized mining companies. She was basically the grande dame who organized the contracts and so forth.
War eben halt so die grande dame des Ganzen, die dann auch die Verträge quasi organisiert hat und so weiter. Und wir saßen mit einer.
We were sitting there once with a larger group. They started to talk in Chinese, and whenever they did that, I switched to my medium mode, which means that I listened to them telepathically, because I didn't want to get ripped off. And once again, it happened to me, of course, that I slipped my mind and didn't think about the fact that I was actually listening to a telepathic communication. So I gave her an answer already to something they were discussing with each other. Then they asked me, "Oh, little dragon's daughter, you are speaking our language too?" And that which came to my mind quick-witted was, "Yes, but I only understand the Shanghai dialect."
Basically, you correspondingly received the information from this conversation in a telepathic way?
Absolutely. Sure. Another occurrence was that my colleagues always checked in what state of mind I was. Whether I was angry at someone, for example, because that affected the monitors. We had an open space office. And when I walked through the aisle, one could hear through the grapevine, "Oh, she is mad today. We better turn off the monitors." That was something my supervisor told me after I left the company. Ever since you left, the monitors stopped breaking.
It was the year 2014 when you decided to work as a medium?
Yes, 2014, at the same time as the book release.
With the title About Dragonflies, Butterflies, and the Dance on the Rainbow.
Exactly. A project from the heart. My supervisor asked me when I had wrote the book. I answered, "Well, I always wrote it between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., which is my most creative and best time."
The motivation for the book was therefore to pass on what you experience within?
Once again, I was guided towards that. The actual cause was a freelance journalist who had booked a sitting with me and told me afterwards, "My God, you are experiencing so many amazing things. One really should write that down." I thought about it. Well, she might be right. But then I told her that I don't have time for it. My schedule is filled. When should I even do that? Then she started to write and said, Just send me some snippets about something you experience. Just some snippets. And that's what I did. For 1.5 years, I told her about my experiences and sent her small passages while she would make a book out of them. I wouldn't even mind if my name wouldn't be on it. All I care about is the message about the mothers and the children, especially the children on the other side of existence, the children in the soul's home. Since a mother's pain is almost unbearable, I wanted to simply help.
Let's talk about the maybe most important topic. What is your motivation for your work as a medium? What's your most important ambition?
I truly love contact with children, no matter if big or small, with adolescents. They are all so close to me, especially because I know that it is quite difficult for many mediums to make contact to them, since one is being stretched to one's limits, for instance. I always knew that I wanted to help mothers to connect with their children again, or to assist mourning people who lost someone, like me when I lost my mother and grandmother, by making contact. I am not a medium for people who just like to come in order to see what's going on in the afterworld, or being the oracle of Dortmund. That's not my main purpose, and I don't like it either. I really want to be an intermediary between worlds, a translator between worlds, and I want to connect people again. The ones who have a body and the ones who don't have a physical body. They are still humans. They are human beings or animals, and not just some bodiless entities, as some like to call them. For me, they are humane identities, and I want to do this jump, this dance on the rainbow, and invite people to discover their own mediumistic abilities, simply because it helped me so much. It was my way out of grief.
Do you work together with others who do grief work?
Absolutely. For instance, Petra Sutor, a grief counselor who I deeply appreciate. We talk a lot about such things. I am also in contact with psychologists and psychotherapists, since some clients get kind of stuck during grief work and can't move forward. An afterlife contact can definitely be of use in such a case.
Can you name an example of a case where you were of help and that has maybe touched you personally as well?
Yes. Very often it's about suicide. Very often feelings of guilt come up. In children, when the parents had died and the children grow up but have never processed the parents' suicide, or the other way around. Parents who have lost their child due to suicide and are then having this feeling of, I wasn't able to prevent that. That is something where I can be of use and support. One example that comes to my mind is where I was in contact with a therapist in Braunschweig. One patient had lost her family in a big tsunami in Thailand. She was the only one left. Her husband was a doctor, and they had 2 kids. When I saw this woman for the first time, she had black-colored hair, was very skinny, and a chain smoker, and had completely lost her purpose in life. She was actually an interior architect. They had a wonderful house and a beautiful life. This woman didn't believe in anything anymore. She went through multiple psychiatric clinics, suicide attempts, and at the end of the day, her psychotherapist suggested to try out something like that. It was not only one session. There were 2 or 3 of them. But I think what really convinced this woman was this one time when she angrily threw against me, "None of these are declarations to me that there truly is an afterlife contact." I said to her, "No, you were sitting on the balcony. Your husband and the children were downstairs in the pool. You were sitting on the balcony wearing a bikini that you had bought the previous day together with your husband on the night market. It was a green bikini with rose-colored flowers on it, and it had something like a golden pearl in the middle. You were on your balcony painting your toenails when the tsunami came. You were shouting and trying to save your family. You walked downstairs with all the others, and the stairs collapsed on you. You were found there 2 days later. And now you tell me if there is an afterlife contact, because your husband is telling me all of this. He is standing right here, as well as your children. You can stop looking for them. Your husband and children won't be found.
Basically, all the details.
Yes, all the details.
And that convinced her eventually?
Yes, that has shattered her to the core, since it was someone who stopped believing in anything, be it God or heaven or anything at all, who is constantly being numbed by painkillers, alcohol, and smoking. Someone who was not feeling oneself anymore at all. Nowadays, she works as a mother in an SOS children's village, where she has found her peace, since she is able to look after children who don't have any parents.
You have participated in a big scientific research study as well, the EREAMS study, which was about coping with bereavement. How did that happen?
I have met Professor Oliver Lazar during a seminar. He was sitting next to me, and I could sense a female child energy. This child then said to me, "He was not my father in this lifetime, but he was in a past life." The topic of my seminar was reincarnation. And every participant tells a little bit about himself. Professor Lazar was sitting to my left, and since I started to my right, he was the last one. I turned around and said to him, "There is a girl who says that she was not your daughter in this life, but in a previous one." Then I also described her according to how I perceived her. That was somehow the beginning. Some time has passed, and one day he said, "It would be so interesting to see what kind of effects afterlife contacts have on people." Do you know them? No. I mean, I have done afterlife contacts, but I couldn't imagine that the results were so incredibly positive. Sure, I've heard from others that I am doing a good job as a medium, but that is not as important to me if I'm being honest. What's important to me is to show that there is life after death, since it can take away a lot of fear from death. And this scientific project is something that makes me believe that people will recognize that there actually is something, especially because many people come here with lots of despair, lots of fear. Many times people come as an assistance for their partners because the partner goes to a medium since they have lost their mother, father, a brother or a sister or whoever it may be. That is not possible. It's just charlatanry. What happens then is that sometimes, well, how do I say it? My little horns show up. Especially when someone blocks like that. I begin by giving out the message to the person itself, but then I do give out messages to the other person who was in doubt too. Oftentimes, when these people leave again, it turns out that the man is the one who is in tears and the woman is the one tapping him on the back because he was, for example, in contact with his father for the first time in 15 or 20 years, who he had lost and perceived his death as something very terrible and didn't thought that life after death does exist. I have quite a lot of those experiences.
According to my information, Professor Lazar was so strongly convinced because the information he received from you about the girl was extremely similar to the message he had previously received from another medium.
Das ist absolut korrekt.
That is absolutely correct. I didn't know that since I never know who's attending my seminars. That's why I have my manager, Sascha Potman, who is organizing my appointments. In retrospect, he told me that his wife basically gifted him an appointment with a medium, and that this medium told him a very similar message. I don't know her. In fact, I don't know many mediums since I am pretty much in my own universe. Therefore, it is not as if I am familiar with all the mediums in Germany. We did the study with a former student, Tanja Schlömer, who became quite a successful medium, which makes me proud as well. The results were, as well, very, very similar. There was no significant difference. That is once again proving me that it is so important that afterlife contacts should be done on a high level, that there are people who are brave enough to face their biggest fears. That's what it means to be a medium, to face one's fear, to work on oneself, and engage in personality development in order to then be able to assist people in borderline situations.
How do you view human existence, life, death, reincarnation, in a bigger picture?
I view it as waves. The picture with those waves, which you might see behind me that are implied there, was chosen on purpose. It is simply the path, which starts with birth, which we walk on, and then with the next wave, we exit this life, and where another part of us incarnates again. But the one part of me who represents me as Bettina today will arrive on an earthly-like plane at the soul's home and will develop further. I think we should not limit ourselves here, because we do not only consist of this single me, but I do believe that one part of us always remembers, since I also remember my previous lives. I have around 20 lives which I can actively remember, some more clear than others.
What about the meaning of it all?
Learning.
A learning process.
It's always about learning and becoming more and more of that which we actually are, to find our own divinity. For me, that is such an, how should I call it, an obvious goal. We come from infinity. We come from divineness, every one of us. Every human being is a divine spark, no matter if it's a human, an animal, or a plant. Everything lives, and we are penetrated by this divine energy. That's why we should be so mindful.
You have mentioned that you actually don't like the term afterlife. How come?
This term is stigmatized. Just as the term medium is being stigmatized oftentimes, it is said, that is the one talking to the dead, or something like that, or that she claims to do so. Well, I have no use for such things. Moreover, it is not an afterlife for me, because everything happens simultaneously. This world is not as distant from ours. Every one of us has access, and it is our soul's home. I feel like the term soul's home has not received a stigma yet, and I hope I will not add one to it today. I think it's nice to take away the fear from others, as well as their prejudices, especially regarding the work of a medium. We're so much more than just the ones who talk with the dead. We're the ones who transmit. We are mediators.
What happens at death?
Here on earth, my memories stay. My memories stay, everything I have ever touched stays, everything I was able to put into people's minds and hearts remains too. But my self, my personal self, everything that defines me, returns home, and it is happy to do so. But I hope that until that, I could ignite many lights within people's hearts, It is really about the development of the heart, and that what is being left behind is the body. Hence, the title of the book, since the butterfly stands for the metamorphosis, the transformation. Basically, we, as beings, are in a constant state of transformation. That is something I consider as very beautiful. I am not afraid of my own death. Maybe a little bit about the how. If I would receive a lethal diagnosis, one doesn't know how one will react. But I let these things come to me as well. I am in trust here too. If suffering will be a part of it, then I will accept the suffer. It would mean that my soul needs that for its evolution, and I will face it if that's the case.
You are not afraid of death, but this fear is widespread. What could one do against that?
I think one is allowed to change the image of death, because for one thing, it is a taboo topic in our society, and I think it is very important that we become aware of the fact that we come and go, in waves, so to speak. For another thing, it is oftentimes the fear of the unknown. If I don't know what to expect, then I will of course be afraid to go, and it makes it obviously harder for a dying person to go if he is stuck in that fear. There are studies which show that many of those dying people who had actually dealt with life after death leave with ease, because they know that something else will come afterwards. I have the certainty due to my own near-death experiences, but also due to those thousands of afterlife contacts I was able to make, which have shown me those worlds that are coming up to us. I was allowed to walk this path for 3 times and see for myself how colorful and beautiful this world is, and this state of bliss, which is unknown to us here on earth, as well as unconditional love. We can't even relate to that, yet it is that which awaits us, and no one needs to be afraid of that. We return home, spend a certain amount of time on the other side of existence, and then come back.
Do you see a correlation between lifestyle and a good, light death?
If we are afraid of death, then we, of course, cling to life and don't want to leave. Just like a child who doesn't want to go to kindergarten, while all the others are calling the child to come, but it's not going because it holds an immense fear and is panicking of leaving the mother, which would be Mother Earth in this case. But we actually belong to another plane of reality, in our actual homeland, our soul's home. Once we take a step out of the body, it becomes easier for us to return home. But at the same time, if one does his or her homework here on earth, by trying to live mindful, trying not harming others, but rather influence them in the most positive way, not a negative one, and especially by trying to control one's own thoughts. I think if we try to lead a positive life in general and change our attitude regarding this topic, then dying will be easier as well. We shouldn't let ourselves being pulled into fear as much.
What is your opinion about religious beliefs that threaten with fear of the afterlife? Keywords: hell, purgatory.
It's all nonsense. I'm sorry, but I have to put it straight. That is all nonsense to me. But that's also a grown structure. I have dealt with all world religions, of course. And you will not find one single world religion that's propagating love only, because it's always the fear. We live in duality here, and people are being kept at bay because of fear. For the most part, we are shown a father or deities who have negative aspects. I believe it is simply a part of our world. But we are basically always looking for ourselves, looking for our divinity. And I think that this is the biggest learning task, the biggest learning goal, to find divineness in ourselves, as well as to find the positive. Negativity, hell, purgatory. I think we rather have these here on earth, something that we create here on earth. But that is part of it as well. Once we start to look at things and keep them in perspective, yes, I as a medium look at things very analytically and soberly. Then one realizes that these are irrational fears that are being used and worked with oftentimes. Particularly churches or world religions work with this principle of suppression. That is actually manipulation and abuse of the soul, in my view. But it is a part of our earthly concept.
Not only religious teachings, but also people with near-death experiences sometimes talk about very unpleasant experiences. Are there certain dimensions, in your opinion, which could therefore be experienced as uncomfortable or burdensome because they act as a refinement?
I think the refinement happens in the space. I call it, or rather defined it as yesterday, today, and tomorrow. It actually happens in the space, because I believe there is nothing worse than being confronted with one's own actions. What I have also experienced was the presence of a council of elders, kind of 3 high-standing spiritual beings who accompany me through my incarnations. Just to mention it shortly, they did view it in a humorous way, though. Whenever I judged myself, they said, "But look, on the other side, you did that." The quintessence is to bring things back into balance again. We also must not forget that people who had near-death experiences, depending in which area they are, bring up their own fears, and these fears generate exactly those experiences they've made. I could describe it with one particular example. In the very beginning, I learned to go into a deep trance and meditation. And there was some sort of fraction in my personality or soul, however you want to see it. One part of me was on one plane, and the other one was on another plane, which felt very displeasing to me. I think one can view it similar to that when people have these kind of experiences. I was being taken out pretty quickly, yet it was a very important experience for me, because I understood then why some people go through such things during their near-death experiences. It really is due to our own fears. Another common occurrence is that a soul comes home from the hereafter, the soul's home, and wants to show itself in the room in order to comfort the mourning relative, but is being perceived as this dark shape which lays itself onto you or anything like that. If we take a closer look at it, sometimes it's ourselves as souls whenever we return to our soul's home at night and then come back from this journey in order to enter the body again, which could feel quite heavy because the soul tries to sink into the body again through the solar plexus. But sometimes they are really our relatives who want to show us, I'm still here, I still exist, and I still look like I used to do, maybe a little younger, at a time when I felt more comfortable. But out of all the fear, we only perceive the dark man who appears threatening. I will give you one little example of that. I was dealing with a family where someone sensed a man with a knife who threatened the family, a monster that went through the room. The child wasn't able to sleep anymore at all. By the way, they had a 2-year-old child who was playing and talking to other kids, and this child's toy cars moved back and forth by themselves. So what happened there? I connected to the mother through the phone, and that what they have perceived as a man with a knife was a golden retriever who walked through the room, wagging his tail. And when those phenomena began, he was on the other side, means he died, just a couple of days ago. Moreover, there was a little boy from the hereafter who simply played with a living boy. That was a child from the father's family who was born at pretty much the same time as the other boy, but died during its birth. This little boy came, and they were both sitting on the floor playing with cars. Obviously, if the child from the hereafter moved the car, it was not visible to the parents who it actually did, since they couldn't perceive the other boy. That, on the other hand, scared the other child, and so it became a vicious cycle.
So, is fear, also religiously motivated fear, the biggest obstacle that one creates for oneself?
Definitely. I think if we would simply accept that we are divine, infinite consciousness, then there is nothing left to fear. That is indeed something that hinders us from seeing our own greatness as souls. Of course, we do choose difficult destinies here, and when I'm in contact with people, I recognize oftentimes that the ones with the worst fate means lots of illness within the family that has built up over centuries, cases of murder, sexual assaults, that the people who lived through all that are so liberated from fear because they have outgrown it, because the worst already happened to them. I think fear hinders us to recognize or to become or sense our true beauty. I think to free oneself from social norms and dogmas. That's it. To not get pigeonholed. That is something I was allowed to learn in my lifetime.
Ms. Rohde, thank you so much for the insights into your work, your activities, and your biography.
I would like to thank you for this possibility to talk about my work.
Thank you for this conversation.